embrace your dreams, and whatever happens, protect your honor.
As soldier! Come and get it!
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we're diving into a very special PlayStation Portable video game that finally, after all these years, is leaving that platform and coming to modern consoles in the name of Final Fantasy VII Reunion. Yes, indeed, we're talking about Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. Arguably the best PSP game of all time, depending on who you're asking. It seems to be the overwhelming consensus. This is that game. And of course, we're breaking out the PlayStation Portable for this one, the Darth Vader one specifically. Love this white PSP. But anyway, I have so many thoughts and feelings and stories involving this game. Let's not wait any longer to dive into it. If you're new here, you're into nostalgic content, retrospectives, throwbacks, all those types of things, consider subscribing. It seems like with what Square Enix is doing, we're going to be talking about a lot of their older series in years to come. And maybe even that Final Fantasy IX remake. That was on the GeForce leak as well, so check that one off. All right, first and foremost, the complete in-box experience for PSP. I'm hoping to talk about PSP games more in the coming month or so, with PlayStation Plus Premium being out in the wild. I want to see how they update the PSP catalog and talk about some games that I've been picking up for this platform over the last number of months. But for now, let's talk individually about Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII with one of the most going hard box arts of all time. With the Buster Sword, Zack, Midgar in the background. Oh, love it, man. Just so many feelings from seeing the box art just by itself. Flipping it over, it says, the story continues where it all began. One of my favorite one-liners on the back of a box, right? Because this is, for those who don't know, a prequel to Final Fantasy VII. The events leading up to Final Fantasy VII are revealed, and you see Zack and Cloud together. Defeat your foes using the power of materia. It's something about great Final Fantasy games where they very rarely decorate their box art with, I don't know, anything detailing the game. They just let the product speak for itself for generations. It's funny how it all works. Cracking it open, you'll see a kind of funky looking UMD here. As you can tell, it doesn't have your usual plastic casing that your traditional PSP games would have. That's because when I bought all of my PSP stuff, I got an amazing deal on it right before the pandemic hit. It was $200 for like 50 PSP complete in box games, plus this PSP, everything you could ask for, and some spares, one of them being this. So all I had to do was buy the manual, buy the case, and I had a complete in box copy of what's not a super expensive game, a decently priced one, and I got it for much cheaper. One of the best deals I've got on the market in my years of game collecting. And especially after the pandemic skyrocketed all the prices, it just turned out really well for me on that. So let's take a look at the manual, but of course the art here in the back, you see Cloud, Angeal, Genesis, Sephiroth. You see Cloud here. Again, just the artistic design of Final Fantasy VII goes so hard. All right, cracking open the manual. This is a good one. Right away, you see Midgar in the background with the story and character concept, who Zack is, why everything is happening in the story the way it is, where Angeal disappears. Sephiroth is a first-class hero. Zack is a second-class soldier. He wants to become a hero. And you have little blogs describing all of these characters. One of the great things about Crisis Core is actually growing up, this was my introduction to Final Fantasy VII. I never played the original until 2012, I believe it was. 2012 or 2013, I played it on PC for the first time. So for me, my first experience, as we'll talk about in a little bit, with Final Fantasy VII was Crisis Core. And I had emotions for this game, man. They talk a bit about what the game is going to be doing, you know, advancing the story. You're going to see a field screen, a battle screen, the menus you're going to be tabbing through, the interactables you'll see in the world like chess, the zones you'll be going through, kind of structured in a way like Monster Hunter. I'll talk about those comparisons in a little bit. The rules of battle, all the things you can do, the guarding, evading. They talk a bit about Digital Mind Wave, a key mechanic in combat that we'll dive deeper into, in the limit gauge that is attached to it. all the different status effects. But again, in the background here, you just see Midgar, which I love. It's amazing what a little color can do, right? They kind of match the blue up with the menus that you've always seen in Final Fantasy VII. And then you throw Midgar in the background, and you got something that Maddie's geeking on about. You got materia fusion in this game, which was a really cool mechanic. The missions that you could select and accept, how you could expand the digital mind wave, the shops, the mail. I love the mail in this game. It must be something with Mega Man Battle Network where you could check your email and messages you'd like get from your dad and stuff and characters that you meet in the game. This game did that, and they would build little things in the world like, Rufus just got a promotion. You're like, oh, so in this part of the timeline, my man was promoted. I just like those little details there. Talk about the hints in the game, some little things that you gotta keep an eye on, like the word on the street, communicating with characters out there, timing is critical in combat, keeping your eye on the SP, looking out for treasure, and then that's really it. A little merch store here, Soldier First Class key ring, pretty cool stuff there, and then the back is just a continuation of the art on the front, as you can see there. So one of our better, I'd say, complete in-box experiences. It just makes sense going with a game of this caliber that it is as fantastic in the box as it is in game. So now that we know what it was like when you pulled this off store shelves all those years ago, let's talk about God tier Final Fantasy Crisis Core. So I couldn't wait till the winter to play this game. As many of you may have saw if you're following me over on Twitter, I fired up a new playthrough of this. I don't know if I will beat it because I don't want to spoil my anticipation and my excitement for the remaster by going through the entire game already as it is, and then expecting myself to replay the remaster when it does come out this winter. But just going back, the memories immediately started to crash upon me. The opening scene, very eerily similar to that of Final Fantasy VII, with the train being on top of it, slowly picking up your head. Just, who's this Zack guy? Why is he so badass? And seeing him tear things apart. But it was when the combat picked up that I really fell in love with Final Fantasy VII, Crisis Core specifically. Because as many of you know who have watched this channel for a while, you know that I struggled with turn-based games for a while. And I know that's probably hilarious when you look at some of the games I talk about here on the channel now. I'm a turn-based freak. But it really wasn't until I had that hybrid with Final Fantasy 13-2, as I just talked about in that video, that I fell in love with turn-based and really opened my mind to that type of stuff. Again, just a reminder that we have a 13-2 video out. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Game is way better than anyone gives it credit for. But Crisis Core, as a younger kid, I was a Kingdom Hearts guy, so the action combat there really spoke to me, but I loved the character concepts of Final Fantasy. I just wish that they were more action-oriented. I remember ad nauseum saying that over and over, and one of my childhood best friends had invited me over, and he said, I got this game, Crisis Core, it's Final Fantasy, but it's action-packed. So I remember checking it out, and I couldn't believe it. The opening moments of the game. Now, as an adult playing Final Fantasy VII, playing VII Remake, knowing that really magical moment of the train segment and leaping off of it and starting battle against Shinra soldiers, what that was like. But then, also as a kid, just seeing it be action-focused was great. So for those who haven't played, it's not like button-mashy action type. Like, you still have to, as they said in the manual, time your attacks properly. You can't just swing away, but it's more responsive where you press attack and boom, you attack. Press attack, boom, you attack. Switch over to fire or Blizzara or whatever. You press that, you start the wake up animation for the spell. It's very immediate responsive combat. However, the timing is important because you'll see like little blurbs on the top of the screen of enemies getting ready to do certain spells, certain attacks, and you'll have to be ready to guard or dodge. So again, it was very much this blending of action and, in a way, turn-based, not on the level of Final Fantasy VII Remake, but it was definitely getting there. And for me as a kid, this spoke to me. This made me want to get into Final Fantasy more because it appealed to my taste more at the time. It was more action-focused. But also, I always say that the handheld was mega important to me growing up. I traveled a lot. As a kid, my brother was a very good athlete. I was an okay athlete, but he was great. So we were traveling all over for different tournaments. So this was my way to stay connected with video games along with my Game Boy Advance SP. So getting something like Crisis Core, which was mission-based, was awesome because you get those bite-sized gaming experiences in while you're on the road, while you're out in one of my brother's baseball games, play a quick mission and then, put it in sleep mode and put it away until later on. It was crucial growing up. So having a action-packed Final Fantasy game on the go was like a real dream come true in certain respects. It felt like this thing that I never thought would happen had happened, and it happened on the perfect device at the perfect time growing up. So, of course, the combat really is what brought me in here, which is rare. You hear me a lot of times talk about the story in games and how it really spoke to me and, the memories of that. And the story for Crisis Core is phenomenal, but it was really the gameplay that got me in, because as a kid, I didn't care about the story, although it was tragic. It was tragic, and I don't want to spoil it, but it was tragic. However, the gameplay really, really spoke to me. So let's talk about the DMV. DMV, oh God almighty. Let's not do that. We are here on Retro Rebound. Let's not talk about the DMV, the DMW. Oh my God. Let's not talk about the DMV. It's a terrible place. DMW. So it's this kind of roulette thing that's going on during combat, and it lets you get, if you get the Sephiroth one, you'll do the Octo Slash, which is epic. I don't know why it existed, and for some reason they kind of linked leveling up to it, which I thought was strange, to tell you the truth, but I still really liked the mechanic because it was a personality trait, if you will, looking back on it. Going back to it recently for a couple of hours, it was like the activating combat mode and the DMW. They were these things that I don't know if they really needed to exist, but they just really helped build a personality around the game. So yeah, it could have just been an action game, but they put this DMW in thing, and as certain moments in the story happen, it's like Zack's emotions have increased dramatically, and you just see him losing it. And as he's losing it, you're doing more and more roulette spins, and you're doing more and more special attacks. I don't know. It manages to feel synchronized properly with big story beats, so it feels pretty good when it's going hard. It doesn't interrupt combat as much as I thought it would have going back to it. So that was one of its major defining mechanics. The other one was the mission-based structure of the game. This was a game that you could have straight shot the main story, but kind of like Monster Hunter, if you will, you would open up, and one of my favorite games on PSP, for those who don't remember, is Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. Love that game, man. And that was the one Monster Hunter game I loved up until World. I was a very spotty Monster Hunter fan. But this game had that mission structure where you'd run around in these open level segments and complete missions like killing enemies, collecting something, talking to people. Very simple mission structures, but it brought, now again, as a returning fan, Final Fantasy VII locations to life, because the graphics were better here on the PSP than they were, say, back in the late 90s on the PS1, although it was impressive in scale for its time. But, to me, just going from mission to mission to mission, just being able to, again, that quick pick up and play, doing a couple of side missions, scaling up my level and completing a very hard mission, it felt great. I really loved that. It was the systems in the game that I think spoke to me and just reminded me so much of Battle Network. The mission screen, the mail screen, reading through the mail, seeing what people had to say, and what kind of updates were happening in Shinra. Awesome. So I wanted to talk extensively also about the gameplay first, not only because that spoke to my nostalgia the most, but also because I do want to talk spoilers in this video, which I normally try to avoid in retrospectives. But I wanted to make sure you all had enough for a video's worth of content before I got into the second half of the video, where I do want to spoil some things, in particular, the ending of Crisis Core. And so if you haven't played Final Fantasy VII Remake or Final Fantasy VII as a whole or Crisis Core, now's your time to click off the video so that I do not spoil the ending to that game. And if this is one that you think, I might get around to it, but whatever, it doesn't matter, I will not be offended. Please go play this game. It is amazing. It deserves your time and attention. Just wait a couple more months if you have yet to play it. It is worth it, and that remaster does look really, really good. So please, no offense taken, go click off if you haven't played it yet. But for those of you who have played it and want to remember the story with me, come, join me. We're going to spoil it now. So one thing that hangs over your head with this game is knowing that the main character's not there in the original. And it hits harder when you know that, right? Because, again, growing up as a kid, didn't have Final Fantasy VII perspective at all. To me, it was just this tragic story of the main character dying. I was like, oh my God, no, not Zack. I love Zack. And then seeing references to him after playing Final Fantasy VII, it was just incredible how they managed to weave everything together so elegantly. And seeing this godlike, horrific character known as Sephiroth who torments you all in Final Fantasy VII, is a guy who's just regularly appearing in Final Fantasy Crisis Core. It's this moment of, you know, playing it in reverse, and it actually works really well. And I just can't help but tip my cap to the writers on the team who did that, because again, not many people probably had that experience when they were making Crisis Core. I have no doubt, because this is a T for teen game. Like, they were probably thinking, you know, yeah, this could be a good introductory point, but like they still managed as like hardcore fans to appease that base too and make characters worth caring about. Like, it's tough to make a character that you know is going to die worth caring about. And I think one of the ways they did that properly was Angeal. Angeal is such a cool character, disappears early in the game, but one thing that gave Angeal sort of this defining trait beyond him sort of being a mentor to Zack was he had the Buster Sword, right? The sword that you associate with Zack, and of course Cloud, was on the back of Angeal, this new character, and you're like, why does he have that? And I think it immediately calls attention to his character. Why does he have it? What happens to him if Zack ends up with it? And so the game starts to, again, I've used the word a lot in this video, but I think it's the only way to define it. It starts to get this tragic vibe to it. And you begin to sympathize for Shinra, the main antagonist, if you will, of Final Fantasy VII. And what they once were, the pride of Soldier, the kind of civil war brewing within them as people are leaving the company. And you start to, again, sympathize for their cause, for the people who really cared, for Soldier and the pride within Soldier to be a hero, to help people, to save people, and how as Shinra expanded with Mako energy and gradually taking over on a military front, the price that people paid for that, of course we know in Final Fantasy VII, but the internal pride price that it was paid by the people who were working there, it really hit harder. One thing I also love about Crisis Core that also VII Remake did really well was made pretty much Shinra feel more like a company. In Final Fantasy VII, you kind of just fly in there and it's a combat zone. You're like, I'm beating the life out of everyone. And it's just funny how the difference between VII Remake and 7 is with pacing alone, because we're talking about the first couple of hours in Final Fantasy VII. And I won't spoil it, but we know for those of you who have played it, how it goes in Remake. But, you know, just again, seeing moments like a public exhibit with vehicles in there and people visiting them and talking to them and seeing how they feel about certain things, it just really brings a major player of Final Fantasy VII to life. And then the music. Wow. Just wow. I mean, it's something, you know, has there ever been a Final Fantasy video I've made here on this channel where I've gone like, yeah, the music was okay? No, never. Final Fantasy music always slaps. This is no exception. I love the boss music especially, but some of the, if you will, light tracks that play in the background as you're like in the Shinra HQ, kind of a brooding tone. You can just feel things are slowly winding down but picking up at the same time. Like, you know, there's going to be a downfall of a lot of characters, but everything that's going to set up Final Fantasy VII is going to pick up. So yeah, this story just is emotional. It hits hard, even if you know the conclusion. I have another correlation I can make, but I don't want to spoil another game in the process of that. So yeah, there's just this, again, real strong aura about this game. And you could tell the people working on it really cared about it. There's a lot of hours you can sink into it. It's fun to play. It's going to be beautiful to look at with Reunion. And it's sad. It's a sad game. One of the sadder games that has come out. And I love that. I love when developers aren't afraid to make sad games. We've seen a lot of them shying away from that. We've heard a lot of creators kind of talk about the pandemic being a reason and world events, and not to minimize those by any stretch of the imagination. But going back to a game that's intent was like, this is a sad video game. This is not designed to always put a smile on your face. Even in the moments when you were recommended for First Class by Angeal, and Zack's like, oh, dude, I love you, and he's so happy. There's like a moment of, to me, sadness of, yeah, Zack, celebrate now while you can. This sucks, man. It's, you know, to me, I miss those kind of stories in games, and I feel like because the world has gotten so sad that people are afraid to tell stories that pull at the emotions and the heartstrings more and more. And I hope we do get back to a time where we are getting more emotionally punchy video games, because Crisis Core is a shining example of that. And I cannot wait to go back with Reunion. Excellent game, great choice for a remaster. And for those of you who are looking into VII Remake, I would say a very important story to understand the overall picture of where Final Fantasy VII Remake is going as a vision. So just my advice to you who maybe decided to watch anyway, even though I just spoiled it all for you. With that, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have to say about Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. I keep flipping it. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. I hope you enjoyed. Please let me know your thoughts on this wonderful JRPG in the comments down below. I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts. Other than that, I'll catch all of you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.